At exactly 2:03 a.m., the world outside Jacob's trailer was drenched in darkness. Rain hammered the tin roof in frantic rhythm, and the wind howled like a warning from the woods beyond. Inside, the house was still except for the faint sound of a leaky faucet and the low hum of the refrigerator. Jacob had just finished cleaning up the modest kitchen, his worn hands drying the last plate as he reached for the switch to turn off the lights. His daughter, Lily, only 6 years old, had fallen asleep with her teddy bear tucked under her chin and her tiny hand clutching a book they hadn't finished reading. Jacob glanced at her door, cracked open just enough to hear her soft breathing. That sound was his anchor. After everything, they'd lost his wife to illness. His job to downsizing Lily's steady breathing reminded him that something good remained. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hurried. 3 slow taps against the wooden door. Uneven, hesitant, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they deserved to be heard. Jacob froze. No one came out here this late, not in this kind of storm. His trailer sat at the edge of town, where the fields met the woods, and the closest neighbor was a quarter-mile away. He moved quietly to the front window, gently pulling aside the curtain, and there she was, a woman, barefoot soaked to the skin. Her arms hugged herself tightly, and her clothes clung to her as though they were pleading for warmth. She stood in the glow of the porch light, not knocking against, yes, waiting, her face turned downward, her hair plastered to her cheeks. Jacob opened the door halfway, his voice cautious but not unkind. "Ma'am, are you all right?" She looked up slowly. Her lips were pale, and a dark bruise bloomed on her left cheek. But it was her eyes that caught him, tired, hollow, desperate. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the inside of her wet coat and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Rain dripped from its corners as she held it out. It had Jacob's address written on it, his exact address, in rushed, uneven handwriting. "Who gave this to you?" he asked, confused. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "A man." Adidina said, "You help people." I didn't know where else to go. The wind howled again, carrying a coldness that seeped into Jacob's bones. He should have shut the door. He should have told her to leave, or at least asked more questions. But something in her voice, something fragile, made him pause. He stepped back and said 2 simple words. "Come in." She hesitated for a moment, glancing behind her like someone might be watching. Then she stepped inside, crossing the threshold like it was a cliff edge. Water dripped from her jeans onto the old floorboards. Her eyes darted quickly around the small living room worn sofa, cracked coffee table, a few toys in the corner, and then toward the hallway. "She's asleep," Jacob said softly. "My daughter." The woman nodded, hugging herself tighter. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring trouble." "You didn't," he replied gently. "Just sit, warm up." He fetched an old towel from the bathroom and handed it to her. She accepted it with trembling hands, her fingers nearly purple from the cold. Jacob moved to the fireplace and tossed in a few logs, lighting a fire that slowly began to crackle and breathe life into the room. They sat in silence for a while. On the chair, she on the edge of the couch, like she wasn't sure she belonged there. "My name's Jacob," he said finally. She looked up. I'm Emily." He gave a small nod. "You hungry?" She hesitated, then nodded once, like even saying yes took strength. He warmed up a bowl of soup, nothing fancy, just canned tomato and some crackers, but she accepted it, like it was a feast. Every spoonful seemed to give her back a piece of herself as the fire crackled and her shivers eased. Jacob noticed the subtle things, the small cut on her lip, the way she kept glancing at the window, the tension in her shoulders that refused to relax. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked gently. Emily looked into the flames, her eyes distant. "Not yet," she whispered. He nodded. "That's all right." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, something fragile was beginning to settle, like the house itself recognized the quiet ache that had walked in with her. Jacob didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know why a stranger had his address, or what she was running from, or how far she had come. But somehow, he knew this wasn't just a coincidence. Something bigger had led her to his door, something that would unravel secrets neither of them could imagine. And deep inside, he could feel it already. This night was only the beginning. Jacob didn't sleep that night. He sat in the armchair closest to the fire, his eyes shifting between the slowly dying flames and the woman curled up on his couch under an old flannel blanket. Emily had fallen asleep, with the towel still draped over her shoulders, her wet clothes bundled beside her on the floor. He'd offered her dry clothes, one of his old hoodies, and a pair of sweatpants that looked comically large on her butt. She hadn't minded. She'd simply whispered, "Thank you," and that was it. But Jacob couldn't close his eyes. His mind wouldn't stop racing. Who was she really? Why had someone at a diner, some stranger, sent her to him? And why did she look like she hadn't felt safe in years? Every creak of the house made him sit up straighter. Every gust of wind against the window made him tighten his grip on the armrest. At 4:42 a.m., Lily whimpered from her room. Jacob was at her door in seconds, peeking inside. She was tossing gently in her sleep, clutching her teddy tighter, probably a dream. He kissed her forehead and adjusted the blanket before stepping back into the hallway. When he returned to the living room, Emily was sitting up, her arms wrapped around her knees. The fire had nearly faded, casting soft shadows across her face. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to fall asleep. You needed it, he replied. I didn't get much myself. She looked at him, then down at her hands. I can leave now. I didn't know where else to go. I'm not asking you to leave, Jacob said, sitting back down. I'd like to understand. Emily hesitated, her eyes locking onto the dying embers. Then, after a long pause, she said, I wasn't supposed to come here. I mean, it wasn't part of the plan. Jacob's brow furrowed. Plan. I was trying to get away from someone, she said slowly, like her words were being dragged from a well too deep to reach. I ran. No phone, no money, just fear. She looked at him again, her eyes wet but not crying. At the diner, I told the waitress I was lost, that I needed to disappear. She didn't say much, but a man overheard. He was eating alone, had this calm way about him. He wrote your address on a napkin and said, find Jacob Warner. He helps people. Tell him I said you could trust him. Jacob leaned forward. What did he look like? Emily shook her head. Older, maybe late 50s. Gray beard, wore a coat with patches on the sleeves. Kind eyes. I didn't get his name, just trusted the way he said it. Jacob sat back, stunned. That description sounded eerily familiar. Back when Jacob was a teenager, there was a man named Martin Hensley lived on the edge of town and helped anyone who needed it. A quiet man with a past no one fully knew. Martin had once taken Jacob in for a week when things at home got too rough. He had gray hair, a patched coat, and a calm, patient voice. But Martin had died nearly 8 years ago. Jacob kept that thought to himself. Instead, he said, you're safe now. That's what matters. Emily smiled faintly, the kind of smile that's halfway between gratitude and exhaustion. I don't know how to repay you. You don't need to. The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have been. Morning light began to crawl across the walls, pushing the storm away. Outside, the sky softened from black to gray, and the rain became a whisper. Jacob stood and stretched. I make good pancakes, he said with a small smile. That's a rule here. First morning, everyone gets pancakes. Emily let out the softest laugh, a sound that seemed foreign to her own lips. I haven't had pancakes in a long time. Well then, Jacob said, heading to the kitchen. Today's a good day to start over. But as he opened the cupboard, something caught his eye. His mail, he kept it in a small metal basket by the fridge, had been shifted. Nothing serious, but he always kept it organized. On top was a folded piece of paper he hadn't seen before. He picked it up, heart pounding. It was another note, different handwriting. And it simply said, don't trust everyone who smiles. She isn't who she says she is. Jacob's hand trembled slightly as he read it again. Then he looked over at Emmeline, now helping fold the blanket. Her eyes soft, her movements gentle, and felt a quiet storm brewing inside him because someone else knew she was here, and that meant this wasn't over, not even close. Asterisk, the letter burned in Jacob's hand like it had been plucked from the fire. His fingers tightened around it, the single sentence echoing louder than the storm ever had. Don't trust everyone who smiles. She isn't who she says she is. He didn't move right away, just stood there in his kitchen, staring at the paper as if the truth might change if he waited long enough, but it didn't. The words stayed the same. When he finally looked up, Emily was standing near the fireplace, folding the blanket with careful precision. She didn't notice his stare. Her expression was calm, maybe even a little lost, like someone trying to remember what normal felt like. She had bruises. She had no shoes. She had shown up at 2 a.m. with a crumpled note and no name to attach. To the man who sent her, and now this. He slid the letter into his back pocket. Everything all right? She asked, sensing his silence. Yeah, he said with a small smile. Just wondering if I remembered to buy maple syrup. Emily returned the smile, and Jacob hated how easily she believed him. Or maybe she didn't believe him. Maybe she was pretending to dot while he cooked. The question haunted him. Was he protecting someone who needed help, or letting danger into his home with his daughter asleep just down the hall? By the time the pancakes hit the plate, Jacob had decided two things. Lily wouldn't be left alone with Emily. He was going to find out exactly who Emily was, whether she wanted him to or not. They ate in silence at first. Lily had just woken up and wandered in, rubbing her eyes, beaming at the sight of pancakes and asking no questions about the strange woman sitting at their table. Jacob introduced Emily simply as a friend, and Emily played her part with gentle warmth. She's sweet, Emily whispered as Lily went to brush her teeth. She's my whole world, Jacob said, not looking up later. When Lily was distracted, with cartoons in the next room, Jacob poured 2 cups of coffee and joined Emily at the table again. I found a note this morning, he said quietly. Her eyes froze on her mug. What kind of note? The kind that says you're lying? A long silence followed. The second hand on the wall clock ticked loudly in the background. Emily didn't deny it, not right away. Instead, she let the question hang, let the weight of it settle over the table like dust in a sunbeam. Then she looked up. I didn't lie about running, she said softly, or being scared. But there are things I haven't told you, because I didn't know if I could. You still don't, Jacob replied. Her expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this moment to come. I wasn't sent to you by accident. That man at the diner, he didn't just hear me. He knew who you were. He said you owed him. Jacob leaned forward. Owed him what? I don't know, she admitted. He said you were the kind of man who kept his word, that if I said your name, you'd take me in. No questions asked. Jacob's heart pounded. He didn't remember owing anyone. At least, not recently. He studied her face. No makeup, no polished lies, just rawness. Honesty maybe, but something about her still didn't sit right. Emily, he said carefully, what are you running from? This time her answer came faster. A man named Travis, she whispered. He's dangerous, controlling the bruise. That was him. Jacob clenched his jaw. He's not just angry, she continued. He has money, connections, he doesn't like being told no, and you think he's looking for you now? I know he is. Jacob leaned back, his mind racing. Suddenly, Lily screamed. Not a loud scream, but the kind of startled yelp that made Jacob's blood turn to ice. He bolted from the table, heart pounding, nearly knocking over his coffee. When he reached the living room, Lily was standing in front of the window, pointing. Daddy, she said, eyes wide. There's a man. By the trees, he was just standing there. And then he walked away. Jacob looked outside. Nothing. Just the swaying branches and morning. Fog stretching across the fields. He rushed out the front door barefoot, the cold mud squishing under his feet as he sprinted toward the edge of the property. No one but something. Was there footprints, fresh ones, leading back toward the woods? When Jacob came back inside, his hands were shaken not from the cold, but from the knowledge. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had followed her, and whoever left that note was already closer than they thought. Jacob didn't speak for a long time after coming back inside. His bare feet left muddy prints across the floor, but he didn't care. His eyes were fixed on the woods beyond the window, the place where the man had been standing watching. Waiting. Emily stood silently near the fireplace, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She didn't ask what he saw. She didn't need to. She already knew. Who did you tell? Jacob finally asked, his voice low. No one, she said immediately. I swear. I didn't even know this address until that man gave it to me at the diner. Lily sat on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her small shoulders, watching her dad with wide, worried eyes. Jacob forced a smile toward her. It's all right, sweetheart, he said gently. Probably just a delivery guy lost on the road. But he knew it wasn't true. The letter, the stranger in the woods, the bruises on Emily's face, all of it was connected. Later that day, after Lily was safely dropped off at school, Jacob choosing to drive her himself rather than trust the bus, he came back to the house and found Emily in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes like her life depended on it. She didn't turn when he entered. I don't want to bring trouble to your door, she said softly. You've done more than enough. That's not the issue, Jacob replied. The issue is I don't know who's coming after you, or how far they'll go. Emily finally looked up. He's not going to stop Travis. He's not used to losing. Jacob leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You were in a relationship. I was married, she said, voice barely above a whisper. For 3 years. At first it was like a dream. Then it slowly became a nightmare. He cut me off from everyone. Friends, family. The moment I got pregnant, she stopped. You have a child? Jacob asked. Surprised I had a child, she corrected. A little boy, Nathan. But Travis. He told everyone the baby died during birth. Even me. It wasn't until a nurse slipped me a photo weeks later I realized my son was alive, but gone. Jacob's stomach dropped. He took him, he asked, his voice sharp. Emily nodded slowly. Told me if I ever tried to leave I'd never see my son again. So I stayed. Until last week, when I found a new name, a foster home, a whisper that my boy had been hidden somewhere safe, and that someone could help me. Jacob stepped forward, his expression shifting from suspicion to something deeper. Compassion, resolve. That man at the diner, she continued. He didn't just give me your name. He told me that you once saved a child too, a little girl in a house fire. He said you knew what it meant to lose and to fight for someone. Small and helpless, Jacob looked down, jaw tightening. That memory was buried deep. Years ago, long before Lily was born, he'd run into a burning house to pull out a neighbor's daughter. The child lived, the mother didn't. And since then, Jacob had avoided praise like poison. He didn't want to be a hero. He just didn't want to feel powerless again. You think Travis found you already? He asked. I think he's getting close. Jacob walked to the kitchen window, staring out at the woods. I need to know one thing. Emily, are you willing to fight for your son? Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. With everything I have? Then we won't run, he said. We dig in. And we bring the fight to him. For the first time since she arrived, Emily didn't look like a frightened stranger. She looked like a mother. That afternoon, Jacob pulled out a storage box from his closet. Inside were old contacts, friends from his past life. Before the isolation, before the quiet trailer home, one name stood out. Detective Mason Ridge. They hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. But some calls, even after 10 years, still mattered. Jake? Mason's voice crackled through the speaker. Haven't heard that name in a while. You all right? Not yet, Jacob replied. But I need a favor. One that might get messy. What kind of messy? The kind with hidden kids, dangerous, men, and a woman who needs help. There was a pause on the other end. Then Mason said, "I'm listening." Outside, the sun dipped behind the clouds again, casting long shadows across the trees. The man who had stood there that morning wasn't gone. He was just waiting, watching, but Jacob Warner wasn't just a single dad anymore. He was a shield, and this time, he was ready. The phone call came at 3:12 a.m. Jacob had barely slept, pacing the floor with a loaded heart and a million thoughts. When the screen lit up and Mason's name appeared, he answered before the second ring. "I ran her story," Mason said without preamble. "Emily Weston. Everything checks out, and everything's worse than you think." Jacob braced himself. How bad? She filed 3 police reports over 2 years, all mysteriously lost. She showed up at the ER twice with accidental injuries, bruises, a fractured rib. No charges ever stuck. Her husband's lawyers made sure of that. Travis. Jacob muttered. "He's not just rich," Mason continued. "He's connected to a private security firm, ties to offshore accounts, rumors of payoffs. The kind of guy who walks into court with a smile and walks out with full custody. And the kid?" Mason hesitated. "There's no official record of the birth, no hospital file. But I found a foster file from upstate filed under an alias baby boy, around 2 years old, placed after an anonymous tip came in about child endangerment." Jacob's stomach turned. He hid the boy from her. "Looks like it," Mason confirmed. "And now, I think Travis knows she's not scared anymore. That's what's making him dangerous." Jacob looked over his shoulder. Emily was asleep on the couch, curled up in one of Lily's old blankets. For the first time, her face looked peaceful. "I need to find the boy," Jacob said. "And I need to make sure Travis never comes near her again." "I'll help how I can," Mason replied. "But be careful. Guys like this, they don't fight fair, and they don't forgive." By sunrise, Jacob had a plan. He would drive Emily to the foster home, Mason discovered quietly, without tipping off Travis. But before that, he had to be honest with her. When she woke up, Jacob handed her a thermos of coffee and sat across from her at the table. "I know about your son," he said gently. "And about Travis." Emily stiffened, but she didn't look away. "I asked someone I trust to help," Jacob added. He found a file a child placed under an alias. Tears sprang to her eyes before she could stop them. "Nathan," she whispered. "We think so." Jacob nodded. "He's safe, but we need to move fast. If Travis finds out we're looking, he'll bury the truth again," she finished. They left that afternoon. Lily was dropped off with a neighbor who owed Jacob a favor. He didn't say much, just that he was helping a friend who didn't deserve what the world gave her. The drive was long, quiet. Emily stared out the window, lips moving as if whispering a prayer she didn't dare speak aloud. "I keep thinking," she said suddenly, "what if he doesn't remember me?" "He's 2, Jacob said gently. "He may not remember your face, but he'll remember your voice. The sound of safety." Emily clutched the note she'd written in her lap. It wasn't long, just a single page with a lullaby she used to sing to him. She planned to read it when they arrived, but when they reached the foster home just past sunset, something was wrong. The house was quiet, too quiet. No lights, no car, no voices. Just a rusted swing set creaking in the wind. Jacob stepped out first, instincts on high alert. Emily followed, gripping the letter in one hand and her jacket in the other. The door was unlocked. Inside, the living room was bare. Dust on the furniture, cobwebs in the corners, and a note on the table. Emily picked it up with trembling fingers. 3 words, scratched in black ink. "Too late, T." Her knees gave out. Jacob caught her before she hit the floor. He didn't speak, didn't have to. The air said it all. Travis had been there, got there first. And now he was sending a message. This wasn't just about fear anymore, it was war. Jacob stood up slowly, fists clenched. Travis had made one mistake. He didn't take Emily's hope. And hope, once sparked, didn't fade, it fought. Jacob didn't wait for sunrise. By 5:17 a.m., his truck was roaring down a gravel road with mud spraying behind its tires. Emily sat beside him, pale and silent, clutching her son's lullaby note like it was the last thread tying her to him. They had no address, no location, just a name, a shadow, and a war that had officially begun. Jacob didn't care. This wasn't about playing safe anymore. It was about finishing what Travis had started, but on Jacob's terms. "Do you trust me?" he asked her. Eyes on the road, Emily didn't hesitate. "With my life?" He nodded. "Good, because I've done things I don't talk about. Things that taught me how to find people who don't want to be found." From his glove box he pulled out a small, battered phone, the kind untraceable and forgotten. He dialed a number he hadn't used in 7 years. "Warner," came the voice on the other end, gruff, awake. "Ready? I need you," Jacob said simply. A pause. Then, "Name, location, what's at stake?" "A boy, taken his mother's with me. The man who has him rich, powerful, and thinks the law doesn't apply." Another pause. "You still know how to move quiet?" "I never forgot." "Then I'm in." Jacob hung up and glanced at Emily. "We're not alone anymore." They met at an abandoned service station 2 towns over. The man waiting wore denim, a weather-beaten hat, and the calm posture of someone who'd seen Warren walked out of it alive. He nodded to Jacob and then to Emily, his eyes softening slightly. "Name's Briggs," he said simply. "Used to be the shadow behind the badge, now I do favors for people who deserve them." Emily whispered, "Do I deserve this?" Briggs looked at her for a moment. "You're still standing, aren't you? That's enough." He opened a folded laptop and showed them a satellite image. "This is the property Travis Weston owns under a dummy corporation," he explained. 37 acres of forest, 1 cabin, surveillance, private security, unlisted. No reason for a child to be there unless he doesn't want anyone to know." Emily gasped. "That's where Nathan is." Briggs nodded. "All signs say yes, but we don't walk in blind. We move like ghosts." "I'm going," Emily said, standing straighter. "No," Jacob said quickly. "It's too dangerous. He's my son, and you're the only one he's waiting for. If something happens to you, I have to see him." Briggs broke the tension. She goes, but she waits for the signal. "You do the hard part, Warner. You bring the boy out. We'll make it look like smoke." That night, under the blanket of stars and wind, they moved. Jacob slipped through the trees, guided by memory and rage. The cabin loomed in the distance, lights on. 2 men outside, armed, but not prepared for someone like him. Within minutes, Jacob was inside. He found the boy sleeping in a small room safe, unharmed, unaware of the world that missed him. Jacob knelt beside him, gently touching his tiny shoulder. The boy stirred. "Hey, buddy," Jacob whispered. "Time to go home." The child blinked, confused. "Where's the lady? You'll see her soon. She sings to you, doesn't she?" The boy's face lit up. "Mama," Jacob smiled. "That's right." Outside, chaos erupted. Briggs' distraction, work loud engines, fake sirens, enough noise to make the guards scatter like startled birds. Jacob carried the boy out, heart pounding, barely breathing. Emily was waiting behind the trees. When she saw her son in Jacob's arms, she dropped to her knees. Nathan looked at her, confused at first. Then the lullaby note slipped from her hand as she sang just one line. His little face broke into a tearful smile. "Mama." Emily wrapped him in her arms, sobbing quietly, holding him like she'd never let go again. Jacob stepped back, giving them space, watching, silently guarding as the sun broke the horizon. Warm and gold and full of promise, Jacob finally exhaled. This story had begun with a knock at the door at 2:03 a.m. It ended with a mother's voice, a child's arms, and a man once broken standing tall. Because sometimes, when the world takes everything, all it takes is one night, one act of courage. To take it all back,